The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, welcome to this webcast on Are You Programmed for Failure? And the subtitle is, of course, Reprogramming Yourself for Success. I'm Jim Lewis. I'll be your instructor, host, whatever you want to call me. And I wanted to just start off by telling you a little bit about why this program exists. Ever since I was probably in high school, I've been interested in why some people are successful and some are not, why some people have high performance and some don't. And probably because as a kid I didn't have a great deal of self-confidence, this subject has been something I've studied for a long, long time. And in fact, when I finally went into business for myself and started a training company, I called my company Effective Human Performance. And because that was essentially what I wanted to do, was help people perform at as high a possible level as they could. And I later changed the name because I didn't think it had real good market recognition, that sort of thing, but that's another story. So, as you know, most of you, I have a PhD in psychology, and I started out as an electrical engineer designing radio equipment, and went back and got the PhD when I was about 40 years old. And I started off teaching leadership skills for project managers and so on, but one of the things that has always been a theme is how do we get the best performance out of people and how do we change behavior. And during the time that I was working on my doctorate, a new discipline came into being called Neuro-Linguistic Programming, or NLP for short. And I was fortunate to study with both the co-founders, John Grinder and Richard Bandler, and take some training with them, and then I later got certified as a practitioner. And NLP has never really become a mainstream discipline, and I have a number of theories for that, one of which is that it promises change on a rapid basis, and a lot of people don't think that's possible, so it's still not hugely popular even after 40 years of existence. But I will tell you that it offers you some techniques that you don't find anywhere else, and so let's get into the meat and potatoes of the program and see what that's all about. Most of you have probably had the experience of making New Year's resolutions or having intentions to do things, setting goals for yourself, only to find that they fizzled out somewhere along the way. And that can be pretty disappointing. A lot of times we convince ourselves we didn't really want to achieve them, and that may very well be true. On the other hand, some people become very depressed because of this. They really did want to lose weight or get better organized or learn something new, quit smoking, change some kind of a bad habit or whatnot, and felt unable to do it, which leaves you with a feeling of being somewhat hopeless and helpless sometimes. And there are some reasons for this. As this guy says here, I give up. You know that the gyms are usually packed the first week of January because people have made all these resolutions to get back in shape and lose weight and so on. And by the end of January, the numbers have dropped significantly, and by the end of February, you're back down to probably the core of people who were going to the gym on a fairly regular basis as it was. And so this is a pretty common occurrence. And of course, after a lot of attempts to succeed and having none of them work, you begin to feel as though there's a cloud hanging over your head. And that's not a good thing. The trick is we have never had very good techniques for changing ourselves and achieving goals and that sort of thing, in spite of the fact that if you visit a bookstore or you search for self-help books on Amazon, you'll find literally hundreds of them. It's clear that this is a subject that has a widespread need, and a lot of frustration exists because of it. Over the years, I've read all the big books, the big sellers, starting way back with How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, and and then I went to Maxwell Maltz's Psycho-Cybernetics, Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. I've forgotten the name of the author of this one, Don't Say Yes When You Want to Say No, which I used to use in a class on assertiveness. And there are some new ones now, Making Habits, Breaking Habits. Of course, there's the Atkins diet that everybody thinks will provide them with wonderful ways of losing weight very quickly, and for some people they do work. But by and large, these books tell you techniques to do that depend upon willpower and determination and things that a lot of us just don't have. So they often seem not to work. Now, if any of this describes your own experience, there's a high probability that somewhere along the way you've been programmed to fail. Now, how is that? How do we get programmed to fail? By internalizing limiting beliefs. Back when we were too young to know exactly how to interpret things that were going on in the world. And as long as you have these limiting beliefs, you can't overcome things with willpower. There is a premise in psychology that many of you probably have heard, which says if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. And there are a couple of corollaries to it. One of them is that insanity is continuing to do what you've always done and hope you'll get a different result. And of course, that's just not going to happen. But there's another corollary, which is that if you always believe what you've always believed, you'll always do what you've always done, and you'll always get what you've always got. And so if you have beliefs about how things are, and those beliefs limit you in some way, then until you change the belief, you won't see any change in results. Dr. Wayne Dyer wrote a book some years ago called You'll See It When You Believe It. And if you think about that, what he did was turn around the common expression, I'll believe it when I see it. And Dyer is saying, no, you will actually see it when you believe it. In other words, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so you have to change the belief if you want to see something different out in the outside world. As a matter of fact, one of the principles that I studied in my graduate program in psychology was the self-fulfilling prophecy, and I read an entire book of research studies that were done back in the 60s and 70s, starting with a school system where they demonstrated that if you set expectations on the part of teachers for how children are going to perform, they tend to bring about exactly what they expect. So if they think children are going to perform really well, they do indeed. And if they think the children are going to be low performers, that's exactly what they get from them. That principle was so important that McGregor formed a management philosophy around it called Theory X, Theory Y, in which he said if a manager thinks the employees are just there to get a paycheck, that's what he or she will get from them. And if the manager thinks that they are there to do a good job, then he or she will also tend to get better performance. So the self-fulfilling prophecy essentially says what we believe we make real and what we expect we'll tend to get. Some people talk about the law of attraction, and it probably is a matter of functioning pretty much this way, that if you believe something, you'll tend to get a lot of it. And that means if you have a lot of negative beliefs, you'll get a lot of negative stuff in your life, and conversely. So how does this work? Well, it turns out that there are two mechanisms for developing these beliefs in the first place. One of them is sometimes your parents tell you things that you internalize. So as this slide shows, this mother saying, we can't buy you everything you want, we're not rich, money doesn't grow on trees, and so on. So a lot of our negative beliefs are picked up from our parents at an early age. But there's also just beliefs that are picked up just by overhearing them say things. I can remember years ago, my father worked in a textile mill when I was born. He made $40 a week, which put us at the low end of the middle economic class, if you will. And I can remember him lamenting that he didn't seem to ever get ahead. And I know that I internalized some of that sort of belief when I was young, and it's taken me a long time to overcome those beliefs. So that's one way. Another way is that something happens in your life and you have to ascribe some sort of meaning to it. And, you know, we do this throughout our entire lives. Something happens, we interpret it, we assign meaning to it, and then we react based on how we see it. If a little child like this one on the slide were to come up and start pummeling you on the leg, you would probably look down and laugh at the child because there's no real harm being done. You're not being hurt. And it may seem sort of funny to you, but your interpretation is that, well, this child's not doing any harm to me. On the other hand, if somebody a good bit bigger did the same thing, you would probably respond by interpreting that as aggressive and uncalled for and unacceptable, and respond in with anger and defensiveness and so on. So how we interpret things, the meaning we assign to things, is one of the ways that we internalize beliefs. And a belief essentially is a story that you've told yourself enough times that you have finally accepted it as truth. And we'll come back and say more about that in a moment. Now, you've all heard that we're supposed to think positively, and you've probably tried it. And as you can see here, this guy is trying to get the whole group to think positively, and somebody in the group is still thinking negatively. And so a lot of the attempts at positive thinking just simply don't work. You also will see people say things like, there's no use trying, they won't let you get ahead, whoever they are. It will never work. You'll never amount to anything. The harder you work, the more behind you get. And you hear people say this all the time. And sometimes when you're trying to escape from these messages, you wind up having to separate yourself from some of the people that you know because they habitually talk like this. And they drag you down all the time. And so if you're trying to reprogram your mindset, you'll find that you have to get away from those influences. And of course, one of the strongest of those is the news media on television right now. There's very little good news on TV. It's mostly bad news. And if you notice that even the weather people have gotten into the act by claiming gloom and doom. If it's summertime, we're going to be blown away by tornadoes and hurricanes and thunderstorms and hailstorms. And if it's wintertime, we're going to have blizzards and icy conditions and so on. And they know that emotion sells people on listening to the broadcast and watching the broadcast. The problem is if you have a steady barrage of this stuff, you internalize an awful lot. And so that's how some of these beliefs come about. Now, there are 3 categories of beliefs. And all of us have beliefs about the world. We call these paradigms or models of reality and so on. So one of these beliefs is about cause. So a person may say, I didn't get a raise because my boss doesn't like me. May not have anything to do with how they performed, right? It's the boss's fault. We also have beliefs about meaning. If I make a mistake, insert the words, it means I'm a bad person. If I make a mistake, it means I'm a bad person. No, it doesn't. You know, if you don't make any mistakes, it means you're not trying anything very hard. And so one of the courses on creativity that I teach, we encourage people to make mistakes in the sense of trying things that are really hard, not being stupid and foolish. We don't encourage that at all. Then we have beliefs about who we are. All of us have a self-concept, and some people have low self-esteem, poor identity, etc. And we have beliefs about our own identity and that of other people. For example, you may believe I'm not the kind of person who hurts others. So if you were trying to achieve a goal and you felt like achieving that goal might hurt someone else, then you wouldn't achieve the goal because it would be out of character with who you think you are. And so there are a host of beliefs that we have about what the world is like, and some of these are positive and helpful, and some of them are negative and hurtful. So how do you identify what your beliefs are? Listen to yourself talk. Listen to yourself think. Listen to your dialogue in your head. I'm fat because it's genetic. I can't help it. Both my parents were fat. I have a bad temper because I'm like my dad was, or I have lots of problems and they're frustrating me. I can't seem to get ahead because every time I do seem to get ahead, something goes wrong. I've tried to lose weight, but I can't for some reason. I'm a failure because nobody ever gives me a chance. These are the kinds of things you hear people say sometimes. I'd like to do something, but I can't do that because I can't see me being successful. This is actually an extremely, extremely important thing for us to think about, because there's a premise in psychology that says if you can't see yourself doing something, you will not do it. And so if I tell you to close your eyes and imagine being successful and you feel some sort of resistance or you can't form an image of yourself being successful, then we've got to work on helping you get around that, because it says you won't be successful until we change that belief, that mindset. I always wind up losing in the end. What can you expect? I had a terrible childhood. I have a friend who adopted a young woman. Well, she was a girl at the time, young child, and now she's fully grown, and I guess she's about 35 or 40 now. And after she got up to high school years, she started blaming everything that went wrong to the fact that she was adopted. So what can you expect? I'm adopted. One of the things I hear in organizations an awful lot is they won't let me. They won't let me do that. There's no point in trying because they won't let me. This company hates women, Hispanics, blacks, Jews, white people, name any group you like. I have a wonderful example of this from a very good friend of mine, an African-American man who has a PhD in mechanical engineering and is probably one of the most brilliant men I know. And he's the president of a company up in West Virginia. And shortly after he went to work there, he was in the parking lot going into the building one day, and an elderly African-American fellow came riding by on a bicycle and yelled at him, "They won't keep you." And Alan said, "Excuse me?" The guy said, "They won't keep you. They don't like black people here." And Alan said, come over here and talk to me a minute. He said, "I don't think you know who I am." And the guy said, "Who are you?" He said, "Well, I'm the new president of the company." He said, "Well, it don't matter. They won't keep you because they don't like black people." And it's really, really fascinating to me how this belief had internalized to the point that the African Americans in that town would not apply for jobs because they were convinced that they wouldn't be hired. And so the belief itself is a self-fulfilling prophecy, because they can't get hired if they don't apply, and they don't apply because they feel like they'll be turned down. And so my friend is working with the community to try to change those beliefs on the part of that community and take an active role in hiring the folks that live there. And then, of course, this last one, management will never buy that. Do you know how much these beliefs cost organizations? Because employees are afraid to assert themselves or make recommendations because they have these beliefs already. I mean, there are different levels of severity of this stuff, but that's just one of the levels of severity. Creativity is a huge problem for organizations right now, and there are lots of beliefs about, oh, we tried that before, it didn't work, or they won't buy it if we do make it work, and all that sort of thing, and that limits creativity. Now, if you've tried to eliminate some of these beliefs yourself, you may have found that there was resistance or blocks or something to it. And here's an example. This comes from a book called Beliefs, Pathways to Health and Well-Being by Robert Dilts, Tim Halbum, and Susie Smith. And a man was asked, can you imagine what things would be like if you were thin again? And he replied, yes, I'll look like I did when I didn't like myself. Now, can you understand why he would be unable to lose weight? He doesn't want to go back to a time when he didn't like himself, and so he's stuck. He wants to lose weight, and yet if he did, he wouldn't like himself, and so he's stuck. There are unconscious beliefs that will keep us from achieving our goals. We've talked about limiting beliefs, but there are others about our sense of identity. If the change would threaten the sense of who we are, then change won't likely happen. I'm going to give you one example. I can remember as a child that there were people in my income strata at that time who thought that anybody that had a lot of money probably got it dishonestly in some way. And you will still see people that disparage folks that have a lot of money and claim that they probably cheated to get it or stole it or were dishonest in some way. Well, if you disparage wealthy people, how can you yourself ever be wealthy? Because you would then be one of them. And if you wouldn't want to be like that, you certainly won't get wealthy. And so these little unconscious things that we internalize can really be factors in whether we make it or not. Here's another example of belief systems. A study was done some years ago and found that when children have problems in school, American parents will typically say, well, it's just too hard for my child. Korean parents, on the other hand, are more likely to say, my child isn't trying hard enough. Now think about it. Which one can you more easily overcome? Obviously, if they're not trying very hard, trying harder will get them there. Whereas if it's too hard, no amount of trying is going to work out for you. And so, do you say that about something that you have difficulty doing? I had a roommate in college who, as an engineering student, he told me he had 109 IQ. If you know anything about engineering students, that's a low IQ for an engineering student. And he said it was like 109. It should be up about 120 or 25 to be typical. Thing is, this guy graduated with a 3.85 average. The only thing he made B's in were phys ed courses. And that really frosted him because he was being penalized for something he couldn't directly control. And he went on and got a PhD in electrical engineering. And he convinced me that if you have average intelligence, you can learn anything. And I still see gender stereotyping where women are told that girls aren't good at math, and I see this with my grandchildren in the school systems. The stereotyping is still there, and so kids grow up thinking, well, I'm not good at that because that's what I heard when I was a kid. Okay, that's enough bad news. This is Thursday. It's a good thing we got the weekend to recover. But let's talk about the good news. The good news is that there are techniques that can help us, and that's really important because typically we get the feeling that, boy, it's hard to change habits, it's hard to make progress, it's hard to overcome these blocks. Well, as I said, when I was in grad school around 1975, John Grinder, Richard Bandler wrote 2 books about a new approach to helping people change. They were called The Structure of Magic, Volumes 1 and 2. And the reason they were called The Structure of Magic was when you see people use NLP techniques to change behavior, it seems like magic, because some of these techniques are really, really fast. For example, you can cure phobias in people, fear of snakes, things of that nature, in 5 to 15 minutes, just depending on how deeply rooted the fear is and whatever else supports it. So more on that later. Bandler and Grinder offered new premises about behavior change. First of all, they suggested that we are programmed through linguistics. John Grinder himself was a linguistics person, a professor at one of the colleges in California, and they said that program exists in the neuronal pathways of our brains, and the programs can be changed through simple techniques, almost like magic. What's interesting is we didn't have all the technology back then that we do now. There's a new book out, or a recent book out, called The Brain That Rewires Itself, or Brain That Changes Itself, and we talk about brain plasticity. we have techniques for looking at brains now that we didn't have back then, and so we know that change is possible. Now, I said this earlier, but again, who did most of my programming? If I'm programmed to behave in certain ways, who did that to me? Well, it turns out you did. Because remember, you interpreted what was going on in your life and told yourself stories about it. I can remember one of mine was, they don't love me, or they wouldn't have punished me for that. It wasn't my fault. You know, I used to tell myself this sort of stuff when I was a kid. Maybe you did too. And so they're my stories, and if I told myself those stories, guess what? Can I just tell myself new stories? You bet. But you have to do it in the right way. For example, one of the things that goes on when you tell your stories is you code the stuff in your brain a certain way. Some of you may make pictures, some of you may just tell yourself stories, and you hear the sound of your voice. It's almost like you've recorded a tape in your head and it plays every time a certain stimulus comes by. And usually there is a feeling associated with your story, a kinesthetic response. And when you tell yourself new stories, if you don't put that same kinesthetic component to the story, it won't change your programming as effectively as you want it to. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Now, again, why have I never heard of NLP? Why aren't all clinicians using it? If it's that good, man, everybody should be hanging out a shingle saying, I practice NLP. And why all the drugs instead of therapy? As a matter of fact, if you take children to therapists or go yourself, generally speaking, a psychotherapist will only give you drugs. They won't do any kind of talking with you or anything other than just to diagnose what's going on. And it's because the model that they have is a medical model. And they say, oh, it's chemical imbalance in your brain and all that sort of thing. So they got these paradigms or beliefs that change is difficult and long-term, and that the chemical imbalance is what causes the behavior and so on. And Thomas Kuhn wrote a book back in the 70s called Structure of Scientific Revolutions, and he pointed out that anytime someone tries to suggest that there is a different approach to something and it violates the old reality, the old models of reality, we tend to resist accepting those changes. Paradigm shifts do not occur easily. And Dilts tells in his book on beliefs that he knew a therapist who, she did not accept that you could cure phobias using NLP in a period of, say, 5 to 15 minutes because it was a quick fix. And they said, well, we've done this, and these changes have been long-term lasting. Doesn't matter. It was still a quick fix. In other words, if it was a quick fix, it wasn't a valid fix, because in her belief system, changing anything like a phobia took hard work. You had to go back to the root cause of the incident and find out, you know, we call this archaeological excavation in psychology, where you got to dig up the past and figure out what caused the person to go crazy in the first place. It's a very interesting thing that most psychiatrists and psychologists have discounted the fact that going crazy might have occurred in an instant, but yet they couldn't accept that a cure could be instantaneous. And yet we know of many cases where that's exactly the case. So these are some of the reasons I think NLP has not been accepted. Now, the other part of it is, as I said a moment ago, years ago, we didn't know how behavior was programmed. About all we had originally was EEGs, and I'm a practitioner of the Herman Brain Dominance Instrument, which is a model for how people think. And Ned Herman, who developed this model, used to wire up people with his EEG and have them work math problems, and he'd see how the brain lit up in various sectors. And he formulated a left brain, right brain model that had 2 quadrants on the left side and 2 on the right side. And we now know that that model is not valid in terms of being very quadrant specific. It turns out that if you look at the brain using fMRIs at the same time with EEGs, if you work a math problem, the brain will actually light up throughout itself. And so when you think about it, that really has survival value, because if the brain gets damaged in one area, another part of the brain can take over and function. And that is exactly what they try to do with stroke victims, is reprogram another part of the brain to take over. Now, here's what's fascinating, though. We couldn't do this years ago. If you have someone, let's just say, play a fiddle, play a violin, and you look at the circuits that are firing with fMRIs or EEGs or a combination, and you then have them imagine playing that musical instrument, what you'll see is that the same circuits fire in both cases. The same cells, the same neuronal pathways are being used both in the real situation and the imagined one. And as a matter of fact, the brain cannot tell the difference between the real activity and the imagined one. Well, that gives us a huge clue to how to change ourselves. This means we can reprogram the brain through imagination, which, by the way, is essentially how it was programmed to begin with. We imagined stuff. We told ourselves stories. We had feelings as we told ourselves those stories. And we programmed those circuits. Now we can reprogram them using the same method, and that's the good news. As a matter of fact, in 1962, I think it was, there was a study done which has been the basis for training athletes and musicians and other folks ever since. Here's what they did. They studied basketball players, and they split this team into 3 groups. In group 1, they practiced an hour every day for 30 days, just shooting baskets, just shooting free throws. Okay, so they're kind of a control situation here, where you're shooting baskets from the free throw line, and they measured the number of hits they got. Group 2 went to the gym for 30 days and imagined shooting for an hour. So they just sat there and mentally rehearsed shooting baskets, but they didn't actually pick up a ball and throw it. And group 3 did whatever they wanted to for 30 days. At the end of that time, group 1 had improved their free throw shots by 23%. But look at group 2. They had improved by 22%. That 1% difference is not statistically significant. In other words, there was as much improvement through imagination as there was through physical practice. Now, there's a lot of people who don't believe that sort of thing, and yet this is what they teach sports players to do nowadays, is visualize doing practice, and they even find that muscle gain takes place and so on. And notice that group 3 had no change or even decreased a little bit. In other words, they didn't get better, but they got a little worse in some cases. So what this says is we can practice mental rehearsal and improve ourselves, but there's a trick to it, which is that you have to associate into the vision. That is, you have to experience yourself doing it instead of seeing a picture of yourself doing it. And I'll tell you more about that in a moment. So I'm going to start you off with a couple of little NLP techniques here just to demonstrate how this works. And I'm starting with this one because this one's kind of fun, and it also has some utility to it. If you've had an experience somewhere in your life, an unpleasant experience where maybe you were embarrassed, or you had an argument with somebody and they really trashed you and made you feel bad, hurt your feelings, made you feel upset in some way, what I want you to do is just go back in your mind and remember that situation, and just form pictures of it, run the movie in your head, and I'll be quiet for a moment and let you do that. Just run that movie. Okay, now notice that as you run that movie, if you're associated into it, if you're experiencing reliving it, and you're not seeing a picture of yourself doing it, you probably also feel the hurt or the anger or the upset and whatnot. That's called an associative memory, and that's an important thing for you to remember. Now, drop that movie for just a moment, and I want you to search through your memory and pick a piece of music that is very uplifting to you. It's very exciting. It's upbeat. It makes you feel good when you hear it played. So, assuming that you have something like that in your head, I want you now to run that movie through your head, but at the same time, I want you to play that music in your head. Now, you can do that. So just get the music started and then run the movie, and then we'll check the results. Now, if you have done that successfully and effectively, what you'll notice is that you do not feel the same intensity of hurt or upset that you felt before. And the reason is you can't have two competing emotions at the same time. And that music, that uplifting music, makes the hurt diminish or the embarrassment diminish, okay? Now, if you didn't completely achieve this, that's okay. We're going to introduce techniques, and some of these are like shooting hoops. You have to practice them a bit. But I will tell you that if you will do this over and over again for the next few days, you will find that you can relive or remember that incident, and it will eventually get to the point where it really doesn't hurt anymore. Now, are we trying to kid you into thinking it never took place? No, you can still remember that it took place. It just doesn't bother you so much anymore. And when something doesn't bother you so much anymore, it gives you some freedom to go on with your life and not hold grudges and not be angry about something that you can't do anything about. And it also may enable you to, if you are faced with a similar situation in the future, to respond to that situation without being hurt or upset. So it's a useful technique. So there's another thing that you can try to do, which is to, as you think about this movie, make it dimmer, let it recede out into the distance, and let it be less intense in some way. Now, the reason for this is we encode information in our brains through vision, sound, and feeling. Visual, auditory, kinesthetic. We also encode information through taste and smell. Smell being a particularly interesting one because smell is a big memory jogger. If you ever had an experience at Christmas time of smelling apple pie being baked or something like that, or you had a relative that smoked cigars and those kinds of things, then when you smell those things at this point in your life, it will evoke memories of the past. I grew up in the country, and it used to be when they cut the grass in the fields to make hay, that drying grass always had a very strong smell. And if I pass a field today that has that cut grass in it, that smell will take me back to those periods in my life. So, or if you knew somebody that wore a particular perfume or cologne or something of that nature, it may make you remember them every time you smell it. So if you can encode your stuff visually, auditorily, and kinesthetically, it will help you to remember stuff. So this is a positive memory technique, is to encode things that you want to remember in all three senses. Now, vision has submodalities. It can be bright or dim, it can be in full color, it can be grayscale, it can be close or far away, it can be in focus or out of focus. Sound can be loud, soft, it can be far away, it can be close by, it can be in front or behind you. And then feelings can be intense or not. They can be painful or pleasurable, etc., etc. So one of the things that you can do is, if you pay close attention to how you've encoded something, I will imagine, for example, that this experience, this movie that you played in your head a moment ago, was pretty bright, close up, you were in it, etc., and it felt pretty intense. And if you can send it out into the distance, make it dimmer, make it further away, make it smaller, make it less intense, then eventually it will diminish into almost nothingness. So those are some of the ways that we use submodalities to help us reprogram ourselves. Okay, let's go to another one. Have you ever noticed that you sometimes say, I really want to lose weight, or I really want to quit smoking, or I really want to do this or that. But if you pay attention, there's some kind of little nudge. I don't know how to describe it much better than that. Some kind of a little feeling of resistance there, or not quite certain that what you're saying is true. We say there's an incongruity there. As you can see, this fellow forming images. One of these images is a very bright color, in full color, smiling face, and the other one is grayscale, and he looks a bit down, and it's smaller. And so that shows how this different parts of you can be saying, I want this, and the other part can say, well, I'm not too sure about that. Remember, if I lose weight, I might not like myself anymore, so I'm not sure I want to go there. Also, listen to how you talk. Do you say, I'll try to do that? I'll try to do that and get back to you. Successful people don't say, I'll try to do that. They'll say, I'll do that. You see, the word try itself suggests that you have doubt that you can accomplish whatever it is you're saying you'll do. And so you're actually hedging a bit. That way you got an out if it doesn't work out. You can say, well, I told you I'd try, and I did try, but it just didn't work. And so if you're going to program yourself to be really successful, you have to start stating, I will do it, instead of I'll try to do it. Okay, now, this is going to be a prelude to our next step. I'd like for you to remember a time when you were successful at something. You did something really well, and you were really proud of yourself and happy with yourself. And I want you to get a good, clear image of it in your head. So do that first. Get a picture in your head of something that you did that was really successful, and you're feeling really good about yourself. And now let's move to a different one, which is just the opposite. Try to imagine doing something that you're afraid or uncertain of. You're not sure you could do that. For example, if you're afraid of heights, imagine trying to get up on a high spot and form that image in your head. Now compare the two. I can almost guarantee you they don't look the same or feel the same, or in some way they are coded differently. Most likely the thing you cannot do or are afraid to do, again, is less vivid. Maybe it's in grayscale, maybe it's smaller, maybe it's further out in the distance. Now try this. First of all, see an image of yourself doing the thing you're afraid of, but watch yourself doing it. For example, if climbing ladders is something that's scary to you, see yourself in the distance climbing a ladder. Now, seeing yourself climbing a ladder is not the same thing as experiencing yourself climbing a ladder. And my guess is that if you try to associate into this so that you are on that ladder, you're going to feel some changes in your body. And most likely you find it a little hard to associate into because it does bring up the fear. So what you may want to do is, when the image of yourself starting to go up the ladder is real small, get into the picture, get into your body at the base of the ladder, and just take a couple of steps up. And now make the picture closer and brighter. And see if that works. Now we have a way of polling people here. You notice that you can raise your hand. If that worked for you, click on the hand raising little button there and let me see how many hands go up. Wonderful. That's great. I got a good group of students here, even by remote control, halfway around the world. I got Mick in Scotland. Hi, Mick. And I've got some people in England and people all over the U.S. here. So we got a few people. Mick, I'm sorry, I know you're not in Scotland. I said that out of habit. You're in England still, I hope. Okay. All right. For those of you that it didn't work yet, keep trying. These are things that you will find you have to practice for a while because they're new skills, okay? And just like all skills, you have to work on rehearsing them. So if you will keep this up over the next few days, you'll find that this will work. Okay, let's move to another technique. These build on themselves now, so they'll get a little progressively harder, but again, if you keep working on them, you'll get good at them. Oh, I should say something to you about pictures. Let me just back up on this slide a minute because I don't want you to start with that one yet. I do not form good pictures in my head. And this always puzzled me because I was a design engineer for 15 years. I designed radio equipment. And I never had a good crisp picture in my head that I could say, I can see that as if it was right out there in front of me. I never could do that. And yet I could sit down and I could draw a picture of it. I could show you exactly what it was supposed to look like when we got through with it. And so I've since found that there are a lot of people that don't form good pictures in their heads, but the pictures are in there. I don't know how to explain that. I don't really know how the mind works in that regard, but I do know that a lot of people have that same experience. And back when I was an engineer, I thought it was just me. So you may find that you don't form really crisp pictures, and yet they're in there. Okay? And the proof, again, is if you could draw a picture or something like that or explain to somebody what it looks like, then obviously there's a picture in there. You just don't see it the same way you would see something on a movie screen. Okay, so now let's go to the next step. Have you ever wished that you could draw on some sort of resources within yourself to access states of excellence when you were a little bit apprehensive about a forthcoming situation? For example, you're going in for a job interview or something of that nature, and you need to be excellent. Well, here's a technique called the circle of excellence that I'm going to describe to you, and I'm not going to walk you through this one just in the interest of time because we're coming down to the wire here, but I am going to send you a copy of these slides, and I'm going to tell you what else I'm going to do with this. I have recorded the narration that would walk you through this, and I will put this on a media server and give you a link to it so that you can download the MP3 of it and play it so that it will walk you through these steps. But here's how this works. You do exactly what you did a moment ago. You imagine yourself having done something that you did well and you feel really confident, and if you imagine what you saw, you probably were feeling good about yourself, and maybe people were complimenting you on what you'd done and so on. And as you feel that confidence building in you, you imagine that there is a big colored circle on the floor in front of you. And I say here that it's encircling your feet. It's not yet, because you need to step into it. I need to change my slide. You can make the circle any color you want to, and when the feeling is very strong, I'm sorry, you do have it encircling you. I'm getting myself confused here. And then you step out of the circle, leaving the confident feelings inside. Okay, so what you've done is you've stood there in the circle, you've built up this feeling of confidence, but you step out of the circle and leave the feelings behind. That may seem a bit strange, but I promise you can do it. Next step is to think about a specific time in the future when you want to have that same feeling of confidence, like you're going to get up in front of a group and make a presentation. See and hear what will be there just before you want to feel confident. You might hear someone introducing you and saying, here's Jim Lewis, he's going to tell us about something, and that'll be your cues. On the next slide, as soon as those cues are clear in your mind, you step back into the circle and feel the confident feelings again, because I promise you, when you step back in the circle, the feelings will come right back. And you can imagine that that situation that you're going to be in is unfolding around you in the future, but with the feelings of confidence fully available to you. All right? Then you step out of the circle again, leaving the confident feelings behind. And once outside the circle, take a moment to think again about the upcoming event. And you're going to find that you are automatically recalling the confident feelings. That means that you have already pre-programmed yourself for that upcoming event. Now, I'm going to tell you a real-world story about this. Larry Wilson founded a company years ago called Wilson Learning Systems. He sold $1 million worth of life insurance when he was 23 years old, and the association wanted to have him come and speak at their annual convention and tell them how he had done that. And he agreed to do it, and after the person left and said, we'll see you at the convention, he started thinking, oh my goodness, why did I agree to do that? I hate public speaking, and I'm scared to death. And he was thinking, you know, this is just going to be awful. And he realized, my goodness, I'm going to program myself to fall right on my face. And so he reversed it. He started every day sitting down, imagining going to this convention, getting on stage, giving this speech, doing a beautiful job of it, having everybody in the building come up to him and shake his hand and tell him how good it was. And he did that for several months until the real event took place, and it was like deja vu. And he used that as a foundation for teaching other people how to sell. So Circle of Excellence is a technique that you can use over and over again. All right, now, this just touches the surface, and here comes the sales pitch. I make no apologies for this. I'd like to introduce you to a program that you can do online that will walk you through all these techniques to help you reprogram yourself to create the person that you want to be. The benefits to you are that you will be able to achieve the things you've dreamed about in the past that you may not have been able to quite do. For example, you might want to start your own business, but you've been apprehensive about it. Or you may be a victim of self-defeating cycles that you've been through. I know people that say every time they get into a new relationship, they think it's going to be wonderful, and then they wind up being disappointed, and it's awful. So accessing a state of excellence anytime you want to, those are the kinds of things that this program does. And this is a online self-study program. It's completely self-paced. You have unlimited access to it for the duration that it's up there, and you can interact with other learners on forums and in chat rooms. Okay, and unlike a lot of these self-learning programs, it's not just reading a book online. You know, you might as well just sit down with a book and read it. These are narrated slides, which make it just like being in a live webinar or webcast the way you are right now. And in addition, you'll be able to download all the MP3 audio files where I walk you through these processes so that you can play those on an iPod or other device and practice them over time. And you'll also have access to some video demonstrations of some of the methods, not all of them, but some of them. I'll walk you through identifying and eliminating your significant limiting beliefs. I'll show you how to build an optimum self-concept, one that's programmed for success, happiness, and fulfillment. And I'll provide you with a 21-day action plan that will guide you through developing actionable, achievable goals, building rewarding relationships, and tracking your progress. So for those of you that are success-oriented and want to be the best you can be, to use the old Army slogan, this 21-day action plan will help you do that. The way the program works, a normal lesson duration will require you to put in about 3 hours a week for 6 weeks. And you have longer than that if you need it, and you can also do it faster if you want to. You spend about an hour online listening to the narrated PowerPoint, and then about 2 hours practicing what you've learned. And of course, if you can practice more hours than that per day, you'll make better progress, but it isn't mandatory. This program is set up to make it possible for you to do this. Now, I'm offering an early bird discount. If you register by Thursday a week from now, you'll save $100. The normal fee for the program is $5.95, and you'd pay only $4.95. If you pay using PayPal and you don't need an account for this, you may be able to take 6 months to pay. Having been through all this stuff myself over the past 50 years, I can tell you that this is a really small investment to help get rid of the blocks that keep you from being successful or enjoying the kind of life that you want to live. And again, you can pay for it over time with PayPal probably, or if you use your credit card, of course, you can make your payments on that. So again, the course will begin on July 28th. That's a month after the early bird deadline of June 26th. And this is an incentive to get people to go ahead and sign up early so that we know who all is going to be there. Now, I believe in giving people money-back guarantee on this stuff. If you're not completely happy with the course, you let me know, and we'll refund your money, no questions asked. We're not going to hassle you about it. And I know that there might be somebody out there that might rip me off. You know, they took the whole course and they were happy with it and still wanted their money back. More power to you. I mean, I'm not here to give things away, but by the same token, I want to make sure people are happy with what I give, because life's too short to promise stuff that you don't deliver. So I'd like to suggest that you register today. You do have the money back guarantee if you're not happy, and the price will go back up after June 26th. And here's the link, if you will write this down: tinyurl.com/M9KSW8R. And if you click on that link, or if you enter that link in your browser, it'll take you to the sign-up sheet where you can register and pay. And I want to thank you very much for attending this webcast. Would you do me a favor and drop me a note at lewisinstituteinc@yahoo.com. That's lewisinstituteinc@yahoo.com. And tell me if this was useful to you, because I'd really like to have some feedback on the webcasts themselves, and I'll be happy to hear from you. I will do a follow-up email where I send you the link to this once more, and also I'll send you a link to the slides and to the narration on the Circle of Excellence. I hope this program will be useful to you, and I hope this didn't sound like too hard sell, but I do want this program to be something useful to people, and hope that if you take it, you will also let me know about that. Thanks so much. Have a good rest of the week, and especially a good weekend, and thanks for attending my program.